for Shortland.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I note the last speaker who rejected the science couldn't even go a full 5 minutes on this very important topic, which yet again demonstrates the lack of seriousness the government has on climate change. I'm going to start with a few facts, something foreign to those opposite. The IPCC has already found that the world has warmed by 1 degree Celsius compared to pre-industrial times. Since 1998, we've had 5 mass bleachings of the Great Barrier Reef, and the years 2015, 16, 17 and 18 were the warmest years on record. And in fact, we have the highest greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere in 800,000 years. Climate change is occurring, and it poses probably the greatest security threat to the planet and certainly to Australia. And that was certainly set out in a seminal speech by the Chief of the Defence Force a couple of months ago, where he highlighted the fact that natural disasters are increasing in number, severity and range. For example, Cook Islands, once considered outside the main cyclone belt, experienced 5 cyclones in 1 month. Diseases such as malaria and dengue fever on the rise in PNG. We're seeing increase in sea temperatures and winds pushing tuna stocks westward, which are critical to the economic livelihood of many Pacific nations. And the greatest example was around the Syrian civil war, where the great drought between 2006 and 2011, which was caused by climate change according to scientists, pushed 1.5 million Syrians into cities, ramping up pressure on an already precarious political system. What we've also seen is in the next 10 years, scientists think that we'll see another ½ degree of global warming, which will lead to food scarcity, displaced populations, disease spreading, a doubling of species extinctions and sea levels ½ a metre higher. And in fact, the CDF highlighted the fact that 81 million people will be negatively affected by changes to crop yields. Several hundred million people will be driven into poverty. 250 million people will not have access to adequate drinking water. All this is obviously a catastrophe for the planet and will lead to an increase in conflict. And this is especially relevant in Australia, given we live in the most disaster-prone region in the world. The water of the Central Pacific is currently rising 4 times faster than the global average, and this is obviously causing more flooding, erosion, inundation of living areas and contamination of aquifers and arable land. So, and again, most of these stats aren't drawn from some environmental group. These stats are drawn from a speech by the Chief of the Defence Force, a Chief of the Defence Force held in the highest esteem by both sides of politics. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, I've chosen to concentrate on this because anyone who professes to care about our national security should care about fighting climate change and should care about making sure Australia makes an appropriate contribution to the global fight on climate change. And I would submit, for all their professed interest in national security, those on the other side are betraying our national security as well as betraying future generations by their attitude to climate change, which is an inadequate target which they won't even meet, Mr Deputy Speaker. So it's not just about national security, though. It's also about economic opportunities. For example, the University of New South Wales's technology around solar PV cells is resident within 60% of PV cells around the world. Yet we didn't get a single job out of that innovation because John Howard and his government were so anti-renewable energy. But there is a massive opportunity, Mr Deputy Speaker. We can be an energy exporting superpower through direct export of electricity to South and Southeast Asia and through the export of hydrogen to places like Japan and Korea. We've got the highest solar radiation of any continent in the world, and we've got great wind and wave resources. So when the world transitions to renewable energy, which is inevitably occurring, we can be the land, again, of energy-intensive manufacturing. That's a great opportunity. And we're also got a great opportunity around the key inputs to renewable energy. We're the second largest producer of rare earths. We've got the greatest reserves of iron and titanium. We've got the second greatest reserves of copper and lithium and a third of silver. So these are great opportunities for our mining sector. And in fact, Mr Deputy Speaker, it takes 200 tonnes of coking coal to make 1 wind turbine. So there's even good opportunities for our coking coal sector around the transition to renewable energy. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, whether it's from a national security point of view or from an economic opportunity point of view, we need to declare a climate emergency and we need to take urgent action, unlike those opposite.